Okay, appreciate it. So I'm going to call this Planning and Development Committee meeting to order for this Tuesday, July 6th. First order of item on the agenda is attendance, and just I should point out that everyone is present, I believe, tonight, and Councillor Steve House is joining us not by Zoom but via telephone as he's on the road. So we appreciate him making the effort to come out, even though he lives on the road. Next item is approval of the agenda. So I'm going to ask, is there anybody that wishes to add anything to the agenda? Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just something under other business, if I could.
Okay.
Just regarding Committee of Adjustment.
Fair enough. Under other business, Adam, can you make sure we mark that down? Anything else? Okay, so can I get a mover, please, then, for to approve the agenda? Moved by Councillor Wheat, seconded by Councillor Gatward. All in favor? Opposed? Okay. That'll take us to the declaration of pecuniary interest. So I ask that you do so at the appropriate time. No special delegations, petitions, presentations that I'm aware of. And so we'll go to item 5, adoption of the minutes from the previous meeting. Can I get a mover to get those accepted? Councillor Wheat, second by Mayor David Bailey. Any omissions, errors, anything anybody see? See none. I'll call a question. All in favor?
In favor.
Thank you. All opposed, if any? Okay, not seeing any. Any business arising from those minutes? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Tonight, under Planning Act, to receive information from the public, we have just one application, and that's item 7.1, and this is RPT-21-180 ZBA 2321 DN, and this is for Mr. Haley out on the 29th 13th Concession Road, and this is from Dan. So Dan, I'll let you take it away. I see you start sharing your screen. So
thank you, Mr. Chair. Just make that full screen for you. You can hear me and see me okay? Excellent.
Yes.
So this is an application for a zoning bylaw amendment for, as you said, the property owned by Mr. Haley of Haley Elevator Inc. for 29 13th Concession Road in Scotland. And this is an information meeting, and the information this evening is being presented for information purposes only. No decision will be made on this application tonight. So the property location, we had a recent severance and rezoning on the subject lands about this time last year. The property is located partially within the settlement boundary of Scotland. You'll see there that the total frontage is approximately 1,100 meters, and the total area is approximately 65 hectares. You'll see in the next slide, which will make this stat a little bit more clear. So approximately 55% of the subject lands, as shown on the screen, are located within the settlement boundary of Scotland. And that's a little bit more clearly identified on these slides. So we have our official plan mapping, which identifies the settlement area of Scotland, which is that kind of tan orangey color. And you'll see that a portion of the subject lands are located outside of the settlement boundary. So the purpose of the application this evening is a rezoning application which focuses on the lands inside the settlement boundary. The subject lands are entirely currently zoned agricultural. So the proposal is very similar, almost an extension of what was previously approved and finalized further to the east. The proposal is to change the zoning on a portion of the subject lands from agricultural to suburban residential in order to facilitate the creation of 5 additional residential lots on private services within the settlement boundary of Scotland. So this application is required in order to facilitate the creation of additional residential uses, and the OMAFRA MDS separation does not apply in this situation because the lands are located within the settlement boundary. the subsequent consent application or applications will be required and processed to the Committee of Adjustment to actually create the lots. And as we know, the new lot creation on private services will require the applicant to provide proof of potable water for each new lot. So in terms of next steps, we are currently receiving comments from internal, external agencies. I have had a conversation with an abutting property owner looking for some clarification, but no concerns. The recommendation meeting will be scheduled with further notice provided to those residents within 125 meters. And we will prepare a formal staff report with the recommendation. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, I appreciate that, Dan. So before we go to the applicant, at this time, does anyone from the committee have a question for the planner on this application? Okay, see, Councillor Gatward, we'll have you go first, and then Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the planner. Are all 5 lots within the settlement boundary?
Through Mr. Chair to Councillor Gatward, yes, they are. All 5 lots are contained within the settlement boundary of Scotland.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Coleman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only concern I have right now is by the looking of the map, there's 5 driveways. Is there a chance that these driveways can be combined into 2 or whatever that we get less people turning in off these roads? Thank you.
Yep, through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Coleman to respond. Typically our engineering staff prefer that the driveways be coupled, kind of shared along the property line so that we can reduce the number of driveways along 13th concession.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you, and thanks to Councillor Coleman. That was one of the questions I was going to ask if we could do that, so that's perfect. The next thing I'd like to ask, and it might be for the owner if he's going to speak. I'm just curious as to has there been any thoughts given as to the remainder of the land there? What's going to happen with it? Is it just going to be severed off as individual lots, or just what's going to be happening? So maybe Dan, that's not for you. It might be for maybe for Bob or something. I'm not sure, but I would appreciate understanding what the future plans are for the rest of this land.
Yeah, I don't know if we can read his mind. So yeah, well, if we can, we'll ask him. Okay. Any other questions for Dan at this time? Okay, seeing none, I will ask one question, and I'll take what Councillor Coleman asked and Councillor Pierce expressed concern about. I just want to go up a little bit from a higher level. And Dan, they created 2 lots already on this property. We're creating 5. And I asked that when the 2 were created, my understanding is we like to see settlement boundaries expand contiguously. And the question about does each one have a driveway onto the road? If we were creating a plan of subdivision, each house doesn't have a driveway going onto the road, right? You have the subdivision, you have the little streets within it, and you have one main road access entry point. And I'm just wondering, at what point should we be saying, okay, we shouldn't? I'm not sure if this is good planning, going one off. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm just wondering if we shouldn't have an overall kind of plan for this. And I think that's what some of the questions tonight we're getting at. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, through Mr. Chair, as part of the application, as part of the previous application, we did review and request that the applicant provide a overall concept, very conceptual at this stage, that shows that this form of development, in terms of the lot creation along 13th concession, was not going to reduce or restrict any future development of those subject lands. So they did provide us with a very high level overall layout that would identify how existing roads could be extended or new roads could be established, just to ensure that we are reviewing the proposal and ensuring that it is good planning for the long term. With this particular stretch, the depth of the existing or of the subject lands does allow for these lots to be created kind of in a linear form. And the applicants are aware that anything above and beyond that would require most likely a plan of subdivision. Our current policies in the official plan don't identify a specific number. We identify the need for extension of services or road networks. Our new official plan will definitely have consideration for to establish kind of more clear, specific, detailed requirements to establish what that threshold is, whether it's a plan of subdivision or consent.
Okay, yeah, no, I appreciate it. And if I look just down the road there towards Councillor Gatward's house there on Oakland Road, we had that 22, 23 unit subdivision created. Again, they didn't create 23 separate driveway entrances onto the road. So like I say, and I understand current planning documents are silent on that. That will be rectified. But at the same time, we do look to you guys to, I guess, make good, help us along with good planning. So I think you got some good feedback from our committee. We'll go to Councillor Gatward, and then we'll go to the applicant. Go ahead, Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the conceptual high-level plan that you received from the applicant, where is the access road to the lands behind? Because aren't these new lots contiguous with the old lots that were created last year? I'm just wondering where the 66-foot road allowance is to allow access to the lands in behind in the conceptual plan that you said you had.
I will, through Mr. Chair, I'll look to Mr. Phillips to touch on that high level conceptual plan to show, just to identify, again, very high level conceptual, just to show how those lands would be connected and developed along with the subject land or the lands to the south where the existing subdivision is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll ask Mr. Phillips. Is there any other questions for Dan before we move on to the applicant or the agent thereof? Okay, see none. So I'll ask the applicant's agent, and I believe that's you, Bob, tonight, to speak to this application. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mayor Bailey and the members of the committee. We're representing Michael Haley on these applications. As you can see, this is a very regular shaped property that has linear frontage along the 13th concession. And, you know, the proposal here is to rezone a portion of it that is like the small finger off the main property to allow for these severances in the future. My recollection with the concept is that there's a access road that's further west of these lots going back into the development, but I'm sure that that plan will be circulated to the committee as part of the formal public meeting so that it's clear about the overall development. There are no plans right now to go ahead with future development. The intention was just to handle these lots that seem to be like a finger on the property. Not to say that for future applications might not come. Other than that, I think Dan did a great job outlining the planning documents, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have, or at least take back and bring back to the future planning committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I'll go to Councillor Pierce first. Was your question answered, Councillor Pierce, on that?
Yeah,
Or maybe future plans, I guess.
So nothing at this point, but not to say that it won't come. So that's fine. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and Councillor Gatward, your question was kind of slanted towards the agent. Was your question answered?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Partially. Bob, you said that the access would be to the west. which would be the end of the 5 lots. So would that be within the settlement boundary?
Yes, it would. If my recollection of that plan is correct, it's well within the settlement boundary. Obviously that'll be a governing factor of any plans that might come forward in the future.
Okay, that's fine, because, when you look at this, it does connect into the Optimus Park, and there's land in behind there that, could be developed, and I know it would be very difficult to farm it, so we wouldn't want a big field of weeds. Thank you.
Okay, appreciate the comments, Councilor Governor. Any other questions for the applicant's agent at this time? Okay, seeing none. Bob, thank you. I'm gonna go to our clerk now. Adam, is there anybody that you're aware of from the public that's here to speak to this application?
Hi, Mr. Chair. No, there are no members of the public here to speak to this application.
Okay, thank you, Adam. I will ask a second time if there's anybody from the public that wishes to speak to this application. And I will ask a third time if there's anyone from the public that wishes to speak to this application. Seeing and hearing none, I will close this part of the meeting off to the public, and I'll ask the committee how they'd like to deal with it. I see Councilor Chambers, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Move that the information be received and consolidated for a future report.
Okay, and I see Councilor Coleman seconding it. Any comments or questions before we call the vote on this matter? Seeing none, all in favor?
Favor.
Okay, and all opposed? Okay, thank you. So I think, Bob, you know what the next steps are, and if you could communicate that back to Mr. Haley, that would be greatly appreciated on this one.
I will do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming out on that one. Okay, that completes all our hearings this evening under the applications to receive information on. And so we're going to go on to section 8, which is our public hearings to approve or not approve, to vote on. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 this evening. The first one is 8.1, and this is RPT-21-171, ZBA 18/21. And this is for our spree at 47th 4th concession. And Amanda, you are a planner on that, so I'll let you take it away whenever you're ready.
Perfect. I just want to confirm you're able to see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. So thank you through the chair. An application for temporary rezoning was received from the owner of 47 4th concession. The subject lands are located on the south side of 4th Concession Road, near the intersection of Lawrence Road and 4th Concession. And then in terms of the proposal, the applicant sought to rezone a portion of the subject lands to permit the use of the existing dwelling as housing for seasonal laborers. I note the applicant applied for a temporary rezoning in 2017, but it lapsed in 2020. And then through the review of the applications and discussions with the development and policy planning teams, it was determined it would be appropriate for staff to also propose a permanent rezoning option in addition to the temporary zoning originally sought by the applicant. I thought it would be appropriate as the current definition for agricultural use in the zoning bylaw is not currently in line with the definition in the provincial policy statement. The definition in the PPS speaks to accommodation for full-time farm labor when the size and nature of the operation requires additional employment, and does not directly speak to the housing typology to be used, whereas the current definition in the County of Brant zoning bylaw speaks to a temporary foundation. I do note if council approves the permanent rezoning option, I am asking for the difference between the minor rezoning fee and the temporary rezoning fee to be waived, which equates to $2,100. And then in terms of the official plan, the subject lands are designated as agricultural, which permits a variety of agricultural uses and contemplates for seasonal laborers housing. And then I also note no new residential building lots will be created, and the subject lands will continue to be used for agricultural purposes. And then in terms of the zoning bylaw, the subject lands are currently zoned as agricultural, which does permit for housing for seasonal laborers. However, as mentioned, the current definition does not permit the use of permanent dwellings and is not currently aligned with the provincial policy statement. And then through the review of the application, staff discussed the option of the permanent rezoning with the applicant, and they are supportive of this approach. The proposed site-specific rezoning permits the use of the existing dwelling as a temporary farm laborers and also speaks to the length of occupancy. And then in terms of my recommendation, it is my opinion that both rezoning options are appropriate and meet provincial municipal policies. Staff are proposing the option of a permanent rezoning in addition to the temporary rezoning, as the applicant applied for the temporary and paid the associated fee. As mentioned, if the permanent rezoning were to be approved by the Planning and Development Committee, I'm asking for the difference of fees to be waived. Furthermore, it is my opinion the permanent rezoning, which includes the site-specific provisions in regards to occupancy, maintains the intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee members may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. Any questions for the planner on this application? Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, first of all, thank you to Amanda and staff for looking at this holistically and looking at a permanent rezoning here as well. That was good on you for that. Clarification, if I could, it says in there the proposed use can only be occupied for a maximum of 9 months out of a 12-month period. So is that 9 months in a calendar year, or is that 9 months, which could overlap? I'm just trying to clarify which it is. Is it 9 months out of 12, or is it 9 months in a calendar year?
Thank you through the chair. It's my understanding that it'd be a calendar year.
Okay, thank you. That's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe, no, you did say in your report, I believe, man, it goes from March till December or something like that.
Oh, I didn't see
Any
that.
other questions? Yeah, it's there. Any other questions for Amanda at this time? Okay, Amanda, I just have one question. We've temporarily rezoned it for 3 years, and that's gone on for 4 years. I didn't see anything in our package from the public this evening. My question is, has there been any concerns expressed by the neighbors over the last 4 years that you're aware of?
Thank you through the chair. I did not receive any public comments on the application through the circulation of the public notice. We did receive comment from the Agricultural Advisory Committee, and they were one of the members that we did receive comment from were in support of the application as well.
Okay. And not, like I say, no concerns expressed by any of the neighbors in the last 4 years that you're aware of. Okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
Otherwise that would have made it into the report, I would hope. Okay, see no other questions for our plan at this time. I'll ask if the applicant or the agent thereof is here this evening to speak to this. And do we have anybody?
I'm Ken Spreet, the applicant, and Amanda explained it well. We've been farming in Brant County since 1988. We run a ginseng operation, and this farm we bought in 2009, we've been using as temporary housing for some offshore workers. Our intent is to continue down this path, and it would be used from the months of end of March into the first part of December.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Although it says Andrea underneath you.
That's my wife. She's the smarter
No,
one. But she's not sure she wants to be in front of a screen.
Yes, we know Andrea well. Any questions for Mr. Spreet at this time? Okay, seeing none. Just hold on there, Ken. I'm going to ask our clerk, is there anyone from the public, Adam, that wishes to speak to this application?
Hi, Mr. Chair. No, there are no members of the public here to speak to this application.
Okay, thank you. But I will ask a second time if there's anyone from the public that wishes to speak to this application. And I'll ask a final and third time if there's anyone from the public that wishes to speak to this application. Seeing and hearing none, I will close this part of the meeting off to the public, and I'll bring it back to the committee, and I'll ask the committee how they like to deal with this, and I'll go to Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move the motion that we grant the permanent rezoning for this. Looking
Okay, I
for a
appreciate
second.
that, because we did have an option there. And Councillor Ferrier, are you seconding that? Okay. Is there any discussion or questions concerning that? Councillor Chambers.
And Mr. Chairman, that would include the appropriate rebate, I assume.
Correct.
Amanda, we'll just we'll confirm that with you. That includes the rebate. Yep. Okay,
That's in the recommendation, yes.
okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor?
In favor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor House. Okay, Ken, I'll just let you know that this decision tonight by the committee will go to our council meeting at the end of this month, which is July, help me out here, Adam,
27th.
July 27th for final approval. And so you'll be notified how that goes.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for tonight.
Yeah, thanks for coming out, and say hi to Andrea for us.
We will. Thanks.
Okay, that will bring us to item 8.2, and this is RPT 21-117. And then again, this is Amanda, and this is for Stony Ridge Phase 3 out in St. George. So Amanda, your screen is up, so go ahead whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you through the chair. An application for approval of a draft plan of subdivision has been received from JH Cahoon Engineering and IVI Group on behalf of Brant Star. In regards to background, the original plan to subdivision included all 3 phases for a total of 153 single dwelling units. Phases 1 and 2 were approved in 2009 and 2015 respectively, for a total of 63 units plus 2 blocks for future development due to servicing capacity restraints. Phase 3 was presented to the Planning Advisory Committee initially in 2019, and most recently the information presentation was in April 2021. And then in regards to the proposal, through Phase 3, the applicants are proposing 63 single detached dwelling units that will be on full municipal services. It is staff's understanding the full development of the Stony Ridge subdivision, including the proposed Phase 3 lands, were considered when completing the engineering drawings and documents for phases 1 and 2. Development engineering had provided preliminary comments during the information presentation in April 2021, noting that except for some fairly minor revisions to address current standards, the engineering drawings are nearly completed to the satisfaction of the county. And then in regards to the official plan, the subject lands are designated as urban residential and are located within the primary urban settlement boundary. The intent of the urban residential designation is to allow for residential uses, which include low, medium, and high density uses. And then in terms of the zoning bylaw, the subject lands are currently zoned as holding residential singles. The zoning category does permit single detached dwellings. However, the holding provision will need to be removed through a future rezoning application once capacity is available when the St. George Water Pollution Control Plan is upgraded. And then in terms of supporting documents, the applicant has submitted a number of studies, including a planning justification report, an engineering submission package, geotechnical, hydrological assessment, a traffic impact study, an archaeological assessment, and an environmental site assessment. And then I also note the subject lands are located within the St. George wellhead protection area. And then through the circulation of the application, the source water team has reviewed the proposal and the associated restricted land use screening form, which was requested, and determined there are no significant drinking water threats proposed on the subject lands. And then in terms of my recommendation, I am recommending approval of this application as it maintains the intent of the County of Brant official plan and zoning bylaw. Furthermore, the subject lands are currently zoned holding residential singles and were rezoned through phases 1 and 2. And then additionally, the engineering design for phase 3 was considered during phases 1 and 2. And based on my understanding, only minor revisions are required. I also note updated conditions have been prepared, which include cost sharing, include a cost sharing condition. I am recommending approval of this application with the revised and updated draft plan conditions, which have been reviewed by representatives from Source Water, Development Engineering, Legal, and Planning. I also note the updated condition that speaks to cost sharing is identical to the cost sharing provision in the Lasani agreement, and it has also been reviewed by the applicant and has been agreed to. And I'm happy to answer any questions the committee members may have.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. Yeah, a couple things we're going to talk about. So, but we'll go to questions first before we dive into other specifics. Okay, I'll go to Councilor Gatwood first, then we'll go to Councilor Pierce.
Thank you. I just wanted to double check, Amanda, the new draft plan that was in the addendum. That does include the cost sharing for this servicing of the sewage treatment plant. with the other developers in the area?
Thank you through the chair. So the updated condition was condition number 36. It's identical to the condition that was included in the Lasani ones. That way similar language was being used. And then, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to refresh me on the last half of your question. I just forgot it.
Well, the cost sharing is with the other developers that are wishing to develop in St. George.
Correct. It'd be part of the landowners group that's identified in St. George.
Yes, it would be.
Yeah.
So that note from Dave Aston, I believe it was, his concerns were that, and he knows they've been addressed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Godward. Yeah, no, I was going to bring that up if no one else did. So yeah, they've been modified, and just to be clear, Amanda, that is the proposal before us this evening, the modified draft plans.
That is correct.
Yeah, conditions, sorry. Okay, thank you, Councilor Godward, for bringing that up. Councilor Pierce, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Yeah, and great report, and there's a number of conditions in there, and I appreciate the fact of, all the conditions that are there. That's great, but the bottom line here is if you read through the report, it must be listed in there 10 or 15 or 20 times the fact that this can't go forward until such time as a wastewater plant is upgraded, which the reality of that is that's a few years away yet. And it also states in there that this is only good for a 3-year, and then they would have to apply for an extension. Best case scenario, that the St. George waterway wastewater is upgraded in 3 years. I think the reality is it might not be. Where I'm going with this is, do we not feel that this application is a little premature? If we're already setting ourselves up for a situation where I think it's safe to say that, the wastewater capacity will not be there in 3 years. So there's going to have to be an extension given. So I'm curious as to if we would classify this as we have this term of council looking at things that are premature.
Thank you through the chair. That is a great question. Based on my understanding, the 3-year approval on engineering is for the final approval of engineering. At this point in time, we have not reached that final approval. We still need to go through the detailed design review, which includes engineering and final surveys and other supporting documents like that. And based on my understanding, once we proceed through the next step of the subdivision process, which would be preparing the detailed engineering design, preparing the surveying, preparing the other supporting documents. Once we've reached the point of those being reviewed and those being accepted, that should align with once capacity is available. And if not, for some reason, the detailed engineering approval is good for 3 years. And if there is an extension that is required, we can reevaluate at that time.
Okay, I appreciate that explanation. It's just like I say, we've talked. We're not around the horseshoe now, but we've talked several times. I'll call it the virtual horseshoe in regards to these applications that are coming in as premature. I'll leave it at that. And again, I appreciate the conditions that are in there. They're all great. I understand that, but it just troubles me when every paragraph starts with that until such time as the wastewater is there. But I'll leave it at that. And thank you.
Okay, we'll go to Councilor Bell next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Amanda. Amanda, I wasn't on this council when the other developments in St. George were brought forward. Where does this development sit relative to the Lasani, the Empire, and whoever the other one was in St. George?
Yeah, so thank you through the chair. So this application is actually more towards like the north end of St. George, so towards the library. Whereas the Lasani and the other applications.
No, sorry, Amanda. I meant where in the process is it?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
Clarify, yeah.
In terms, so are you just looking in clarification in regards to the first to get servicing?
Yeah, I'm interested in whether this puts this particular development further up the queue than Lasani and Empire, if there was any issue around the sharing out of servicing when it is available, or are they equally ready to go?
Thank you through the chair. For specifics, I would look towards my director, but based on my understanding, the servicing for this application There is servicing abutting the subject lands already, and the extension would only require a minor extension. Whereas based on my understanding, the Lasani and other developments require a little bit more extensive servicing and infrastructure requirements. But in terms of specifics into who will receive capacity first, I would look towards my director or potentially the general manager of operations.
Okay, and yeah, Matt, jump in, or Pam, go ahead, because there's that question, and then I want to circle around to what Councilor Pierce said, because we have had that one discussion, but go ahead on this one. On
Right.
Councilor Bell.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda, and through the chair to Councillor Bell. This application is, would get allocation ahead simply because, as Amanda states, in terms of servicing, it's ripe. It's next to a serviced area, whereas a lot of the lands around this entire community require some significant infrastructure in order to have them serviced. In terms of when, we're thinking, that 3 to 4 year window. There's an official plan policy, and I'd like to circle back on that. But there's an official plan policy that says, if servicing is not within a certain time frame, so beyond that 3 to 4 year window, then it would be premature. So we're of the understanding that servicing would be available to this development within that time frame, and that's what gives us the ability to recommend approval of this one. There's other developments in the St. George area that doesn't have that same time frame, and so when it comes to those developments, we're a little bit more constrained in our recommendation. Any further details in regards to servicing, I would defer to the GM of operations, although I'm not sure he's here tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate the answer. Councilor Bell, you're okay with that? Councilor Pierce, the 3 to 4 years. Matt, I just want to follow up on the one thing you said before we ask the committee, and if there's any more questions. You said a 3 to 4 year timeline. Why aren't we using, say, an H for this? There's no servicing available. We'll approve it and we'll attach an H until such time as servicing is available.
Yeah. Through you, Councillor Miller, I believe we are putting an H on this as part of our recommendation, but I'll defer to you.
Okay.
Sorry, thank you through the chair. I can confirm that the subject lands already have a holding provision on it, and they do not need to be rezoned with the holding at this point in time because it's already on this portion.
Okay, appreciate the answer. Any other questions from the committee to our planners at this time? Okay, see none. I do have one question. If I read in our report, and we don't see this too often, it talks about source water and where this is going to be located. It says there was the potential for significant drinking water threats within these boundaries. Given that, is there anything that we would have to do, whether it's a municipality or with the developer, is anything they would have to do over and above, say, what a developer would normally do, given that it's in a significantly important wellhead area?
Thank you through the chair. So I can confirm that the source water team did review this application, and it's reflected in condition number 23. They asked for the restricted land use screening form to be completed as a condition. The applicant and the agent have completed that land use restricting form ahead of this meeting, and it has been sent to our source water team, and they reviewed it and they confirmed that there is no no potential threat with this proposed residential use in this area.
All right. You mentioned that during your presentation, but it just to me, I don't know. Like I say, I thought there would have been more, but I guess there isn't. And just to be clear, I guess because it is on, public infrastructure, water, like water and wastewater, I guess that helps a lot too. But like I say, we don't normally see that in the application, so that's why I wanted to bring that up. Okay, any other questions? Oh, Councillor Wheat.
It's not a question, it's a comment. Just to calm the nerves of some other councillors that the Spiels Act might be a bit premature here. This subdivision's been going on since 2003. It started by Eddie's father, Jack, who always gave us a heads up what he might be doing 5 years from now. They're always letting us know where they're going. And this is his son, Eddie, that has taken over at Stony Ridge. And he's just letting us know where we might be going 3 or 4 years from now. And there's already an H put on this property 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
Very,
Councillor.
very, very comfortable with this.
Okay, if I don't see any other hands up, I'm going to ask if the applicant or the agent thereof would like to speak to this. And Joe,
I may speak on behalf of the applicant.
Yep, go ahead.
First to the chair and to the members, I'm here as well as Mr. Cahoon is here to answer any questions you may have. Firstly, we want to compliment staff and that they prepared this report. It's extremely comprehensive. It's reflective of what is to be in place when this plan does advance. We have reviewed it. We are in support. We have reviewed the proposed alteration that was put into the report based on a response we all received. We are in support of that. We are here to answer any questions which you may have, and we ask that you support staff.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stewart. Does anybody on the committee have a question of Mr. Stewart? And Councillor Howes, if you have a question, you just have to shout it out, okay? Okay, seeing none.
Understood, thank you.
Okay, I appreciate that. Okay, seeing no questions, I will ask our clerk if there's anybody from the public that is here this evening that wishes to speak to this application.
Hi, Mr. Chair. No, there are no members of the public here to speak to this application.
Okay, thank you. At the same time, I will ask a second time if there's anybody from the public that wishes to speak to this application. And I'll ask a third time if there's anybody from the public that wishes to speak to this application. Seeing and hearing none, I'll close this part of the meeting off to the public and I'll turn it back to the committee to see how they would like to deal with this application. And I see Councillor Wheat has his hand up. Councillor Wheat, go ahead.
I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, appreciate that. We need a seconder to get it on this floor. We'll go with Mayor David Bailey. Any comments, discussion, questions before we call the vote? Okay, I appreciate Councillor Wheat said earlier, it has been around a long time. And I know a lot of us have seen it over the years. So I will call the question. All in favor?
Favor.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, see none. I appreciate that. And Mr. Stewart and Joe, I think you guys know the next step. It'll go to our council meeting, July 27th for final approval. So appreciate you guys coming out. Okay, so that completes, let me go to the agenda here. That completes item 8.2, and this will bring us up to 8.3, and that is RPT 21-144, ZBA 25/21. And this is the home business pilot project that we've already heard about. And Kayla, you are going to talk about this. So go ahead, your screen's up. So anytime you're ready. And just make sure you're off mute there, Kayla.
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you, yes.
Okay, great. Good evening, council and members of the public. My presentation tonight is for a temporary use bylaw for the period of 1 year to broaden permissions for home businesses within the dwelling and within accessory residential buildings. The temporary zoning amendment applies to the entire county of Brant. This temporary use proposal is being brought forward in response to some inconsistencies to the current home occupation provisions in our zoning bylaw. And secondly, the proposal acts as a small business incubator in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The application aligns with the County of Brant Economic Development Strategy and Action Plan in relation to growing a more diversified local economy and economic resilience. More specifically, this proposal also speaks to the action to support the current live and work ratio. In addition to the existing home occupation provisions, we are proposing to add 3 new definitions which will provide more flexibility for home businesses. These definitions include a home-based business pilot project, which outlines specifics for indirect sales and services as well as direct sales and services. And it should be noted that the proposal does not allow for home industries. So what are the main changes for this temporary use proposal? So I'm just going to kind of run through some of the key changes that we're looking to do here on a temporary basis. So currently businesses are, they must be conducted within the dwelling unit. So we're looking to expand and just clarify that these businesses can also occur outdoors. So for fitness classes and swimming lessons, but of course, subject to our noise bylaw. We're also looking to look at the accessory residential structures. So currently, home businesses are not permitted within accessory residential buildings, and provided they are appropriate size and scale, we look to broaden that permission through this bylaw. So next is some restrictions on uses. We want to just clarify that there's pickups and drop-offs permitted, so that's the direct sales and services portion, and broaden some uses for commercial and more institutional uses, and some flexibility with the retail. Currently, right now, any home occupation in an urban residential zone or a non-urban residential zone cannot have an employee. And so what we're looking to do for this temporary bylaw is to allow for 1 additional employee in addition to the proprietor of the business. And that is, of course, subject to providing the appropriate parking for the house, as well as the employee and then any of their customers. And then lastly, in terms of size, no more than 25% of the gross floor area to a maximum of 45 square meters is the current provisions for home occupation. And what we're looking to do for the temporary use is to allow for 50 square meters for the gross floor area of the dwelling unit and any of the accessory residential structures on the property. It should be noted that the proposed home businesses will need to apply and contact the appropriate divisions related to building permits, building code, fire code, any health unit requirements, or any other unnecessary regulations that would be required for their unique business. The noise bylaw and the sign bylaw are also applicable to assist in ensuring that the residential character of the neighborhood is being maintained. The application has been advertised in the Brantford Expositor and through the County of Brant social media outlets, and no comments from the public were received. It's my professional recommendation that the application and proposed temporary amendment be approved for the period of 1 year. After such time, a report will be brought back to Council outlining the completion of the program and next steps. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thanks, Kayla. I'll get you to stop sharing your screen so I can see everybody.
Question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Councilor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Kayla. Thanks for this report. It's great. It's great to see this. I'm very pleased to support it. I know that small town charm is not one of the necessarily an official pillar in our economic development strategy and action plan, but I think this is an important element of the small town charm that people look for in our community. So this is all great. That my question is a little bit more about what happens in September of 2022, and to some degree for the benefit of people that might be watching this and curious to see how this is going. Can you speak a little bit more in detail of what happens upon the expiry? Like, does the planning department at that stage come to council with a recommendation to either stop or continue, or if you just detail that a little bit further, please?
Sure, thank you. Through the chair, to Councillor House. So how we sort of anticipate the program working would be that this temporary use bylaw would be for the period of 1 year, and after such time, it would expire. And as mentioned sort of earlier in my presentation, we do note that there are some inconsistencies in the zoning bylaw today as it stands related to home occupation. And so this 1 year period would allow us to kind of get some feedback and see where it is appropriate to make some changes and some updates. So we would anticipate that within the next year or so, we would come back to council. So through the housekeeping zoning amendments that you've seen in the past, we would simply be bringing back permanent zoning changes to address some of the things that we're looking to change.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Caleb. Matt, did you want to jump in?
Well, thank you, Councilor Miller. Yeah, I think Kayla has addressed that really well. If anything, we might just come back a little bit earlier ahead of the expiration of the temporary use bylaw, just to make sure that there's lots of overlap there. And, you know, in the event that the program does need to be canceled or revisited, I can see it probably being revisited, not canceled. It's always good to have these things as a trial and then tweak them a little bit to improve them. But we would do that with lots of time and give people lots of notice.
Okay. Tweak the trial balloon. Don't shoot it. Okay. Any other questions for Kayla on this? Okay, we'll go to Councillor LaFerriere, and then we'll go to Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm in agreement with Steve. I think this is a really good proposal, especially considering the 16 months we've just went through. I have two questions, however, and I do plan on supporting this fully. One is, and maybe just to speak a little bit to, or maybe confirm that for a person who is deciding to start a business this year, a home-based business in this way, that there is a chance the bylaw could be canceled within a year or a year from now, but the likelihood is not that's not the case in all likelihood. The case is that there's more likely to be some changes, and our economic development team planning will work with these businesses to adapt to any changes that we might make in the bylaw between now and a year from now. Is that a fair assessment?
Through the chair to Councillor LaFerriere, yes, that is fair. And I know that our friends in economic development are happy to assist businesses who are looking to get started. So kind of connect with economic development as a starting point. And yeah, it's fair to say that was a good assessment.
Okay. And through you, Mr. Chair, my next question is, when we look at neighbor disputes, and we've all been getting calls about neighbor disputes that don't have businesses attached to them, but when we look at neighbor complaints that may happen throughout this process, I guess two parts to this question. One, can we keep a record of maybe not the specifics, but the types of complaints that we may get this year to help us make better decisions as a council? And also, when it comes to tweaks we might want to do. And also, how does that process work if the person who's starting a home-based business isn't following the guidelines of this bylaw, right? I know what happens if they are, then it won't come up to council necessarily. But what if they aren't? What's going to be the process there? Are we getting in touch with them? Are we trying to help them? Are we fining? Is it bylaw? Is it ECDEV? Is it planning? Right? Like a little bit more color on that aspect of this, because there may be some neighbor conflict.
Sure, thank you. Through the chair, great question. So we will be monitoring the program for the period of 1 year, and essentially it will be through a complaint basis. So it will be through bylaw enforcement, and we will ask that they do track the types of sort of issues that may come up, and that will give us a better indication of any tweaks that need to be made on a more permanent basis. So just to kind of clarify for your question, it will be through bylaw that the program is monitored, and we will follow up in the year from now with sort of some of those findings if anything does come up.
And one more quick one, if I can, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I had asked last time this came to council if we were going to be looking at some traffic patterns, because there's an opportunity with home-based businesses that they'll see some traffic increases, but we'll also see some traffic decreases if people aren't commuting all the time and things like that. How might we be tracking that through the course of the year? Or have we had any more discussion about that on the staff level?
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, I do remember that that comment came about at the information stage. We did reach out to our development engineering team to see if they had any comments. They did not have any specifics related to traffic. But again, I would just say that it will be part of our monitoring system. And again, it's a trial for that 1 year period. And typically, I think, you know, more so in terms of bylaw enforcement, it will be related to parking, not so much traffic, but it will again be part of the monitoring through the next year to see if any of those issues are raised.
Oh, thank you. This is a great report, great recommendation. Happy to support.
Okay, appreciate it. Councillor Bell, I thought you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Kayla. Could you just, for the benefit of people watching, clarify that this proposal applies to existing businesses that are there today that might wish to expand, as well as new businesses that might want to start in the coming year?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct. It would apply to the entire county of Brant for any existing businesses that are currently in compliance and wish to expand, or a new business that's starting up.
Thank you. And second question, in the 1 year report, can we strive to put an economic value on this and perhaps a labour value, the number of jobs created? So that I think will be a very good measure at the end of 1 year. And I do support this this proposal.
Okay, so hopefully that's part of the metrics. Okay, we'll go to Councillor Pierce next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, yeah, I fully support this as well. A couple of questions I have. Actually, as recent as today, I had somebody ask me in regards to them thinking about starting their own home-based business, and I said, well, tune in tonight because there's going to be some great information on it. Is this going to be advertised anywhere through economic development? Do we know? Because as I say, I've just told them to tune in because there's a lot of good information that's going to come down tonight that may help them in making a decision to do a home-based business. I'm just curious, has there been any thought given as to whether it be, you know, through our communications or website or anything like that? Are we going to be advertising the fact that we've now adjusted things so folks in these times, which is fantastic, are able to do things out of their home and accessory buildings?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. So we have actually met with our economic development team as well as communications to sort of strategize about advertising. Should this be approved by council tonight, they will be ready to implement some advertising through all the various social media outlets. And currently it is being advertised through social media just to kind of let everybody know that there is this application being brought forward tonight. But yes, it will definitely be advertised through all of the various social media streams, and our communications team is working on that in the background.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And just if anybody has questions, just contact either one of the councillors or the economic development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Kayla at this time? Okay, seeing none. I guess this is well, we're considering this under the planning.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, go ahead, Councillor Chambers. Yeah.
I was trying to get your attention there. Nobody saw me, I guess. Must be my red shirt. Through you, must indicate that we're going to monitor this for 1 year, which everybody thinks is a good idea. My question is, what are some of the things that could happen that would cause us, after 1 year, to discontinue the program?
Kayla, go ahead.
Sure. So through the chair, there may be some tweaking perhaps that, you know, may come about in that 1 year period. So certain things about, you know, allowing an additional employee, perhaps if parking becomes a concern, that may be one way to sort of reduce the parking factor happening. In terms of accessory buildings, so we're allowing the business to operate in accessory buildings. If we're finding that sort of any complaints seem to be reoccurring in those areas, perhaps we remove that and stick back to just within the dwelling. So I think really those are kind of the types of things we want to look for. If there's any sort of consistencies with what we're seeing in terms of any bylaw enforcement, and then we can look to tweak some of those changes on a permanent basis after that.
Okay, thank you, Kayla. I don't.
Mr. Chairman, I have a follow-up question if I might.
Yeah, go ahead. I don't see at the moment, but go ahead.
Okay. That being said, just to be clear, the tweaking is to the bylaw. It's not tweaking the uses that have been approved by the bylaw. In other words, if I do something, if I have home-based business and I'm doing something that is not conducive to the neighborhood in the opinion of the neighbors, you can tweak the bylaw, but I'm basically grandfathered in and I can't be tweaked. Is that correct? We're not tweaking the user, we're tweaking the bylaw after a 1-year monitoring period.
Kayla
Speak to
or
that.
Matt? Yeah, go
Sure.
ahead.
Yeah, through the chair, I can speak to that to Councillor Chambers. So this temporary use bylaw will, it doesn't change really a whole lot of the uses that are permitted. What it does is it expands kind of the usability of the uses that are already permitted. What we will be monitoring through bylaw enforcement is the level of conflict that would be created as part of this pilot program. So we'd be looking at things like noise or light pollution, whether uses that are side by side can basically coexist together. And through that monitoring program, if we find that there is something that has sprung up, something that has started that creates too much conflict, that's where we'll revisit it in less than a year to find some amendments to the bylaw to make it work better. I think, rather than putting people's jobs or anything like that at jeopardy, we would rather take the approach of working with people and trying to find positive ways to make this work within our community. And so I can see that would be the approach that we would take at that point.
Councillor Chambers? Follow up.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all. I'm supportive of the project. Anything that has fewer and lesser regulations, I think is a step in the right direction. And hopefully this will spur some economic development and make some neighborhoods more resilient and better neighborhoods.
Okay, appreciate the comments. Councillor Pierce, I think you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, well said, Councillor Chambers. And second of all, Mr. Chair, at the appropriate time, I'd like to call for a recorded vote on this.
Yes, absolutely. Any other questions for Kayla at this time? Okay, seeing none, I will go to our clerk because we are hearing this under the Public Planning Act. So is there anybody from the public, Adam, that wishes to speak to this?
Hi, Mr. Chair. No, there are no members of the public here to speak to this application.
Okay, I will ask a second time if there's anyone from the public that wishes to speak this. And I'll ask a third time if there's anyone from the public that wishes to speak to this zoning bylaw amendment. Seeing and hearing none, I'll close this part of the meeting off to the public and I'll turn it back to committee and ask how they would like to deal with it. So I see Councillor Pierce is moving it and seconded by Mayor David Bailey. Any comments or questions before we call the vote? Okay, I think everybody had a good chance. Seems a lot of positive comments, a little bit of cautionary. So I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Okay, so hold on. Yeah. No, I got that. Adam, how do we do this? You want to go through each one and then we'll say our yay or nay.
Yes, that's correct. Thanks. So we'll start with Councillor Pierce.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yay.
Councillor Chambers.
Yes.
Councillor Coleman.
Yes.
Councillor Gatward. Sorry, Councillor Gatward, you're on mute.
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Bailey.
Yes.
Councillor Wheat.
Yes.
Councillor McAlpine.
Yes.
Councilor Ferrier,
Yes.
Councilor House.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, and Councilor Bell.
Yes.
Okay, the vote is carried unanimously 11-0.
Okay, thank you very much, Adam. Okay, I see Kayla's still with us, which is good because this will bring us up to item 8.4, and this is RPT-21-165, ZBA 20/21. This is for Scenic Ridges Sales Trailer at 124 Rest Acres Road. So Kayla, your screen is now being shared, so make sure you're off mute and go ahead anytime you're ready.
Thank you. You can hear me okay?
Yes, I can now. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening, council and members of the public. This is a zoning bylaw amendment application for 1024 Rest Acres Road in Paris for the Scenic Ridge subdivision. The application is being submitted by MHBC on behalf of Live Communities, and this application is being brought forward for recommendation this evening. This application is proposing to a continued use essentially of the temporary sales trailer for the Scenic Ridge subdivision. And the trailer will be looking to have an extension for an additional time period for the maximum of 3 years as outlined in the Planning Act. Planning staff are recommending that this application be approved for additional period of 3 years, provided that there is a slight adjustment to the entrance to accommodate for the future roundabout within this area. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, Kayla. Any questions from the committee for Kayla on this application at this time? Okay, so we'll go to Councillor Pierce first, and then we'll go to Councillor Gowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Kayla. Just clarification, the entrance, are we thinking about moving it further back on Rest Acres, or will it be off of Scenic Ridge?
Through the chair, it's my understanding that it would be off of Scenic Ridge. And the exact wording is included within the bylaw, which came from our development engineering group.
Perfect. I just wanted clarification on that because somebody asked me that. Thank you.
No problem.
Yep, and we have an answer for that. Okay, Councillor Gower, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Kayla. Kayla, you just mentioned development engineering. So they have approved the location and it's not going to interfere with any utilities or infrastructure installations, because we did have a situation with another trailer that had to be moved because so that's why I'm thinking of this. So everything's good with the infrastructure, utilities. This isn't going to be in the way.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Gatward. Yes, this application was reviewed by all the various departments and no concerns were raised, subject to the fact that the entrance will need to be addressed, and that has been included within the bylaw. So no other concerns were raised by utilities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Kayla at this time? Seeing none, is there anybody, is the applicant here this evening or their agent to speak to this? Adam?
Hi, Mr. Chair. No, the applicant's agent has emailed advising that they concur with the staff report and they will not be attending.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay, since they're not here, it is a planning application, so we do have to see if anybody from the public is here this evening to speak to it. And Adam, are you aware of anyone from the public here this evening?
Hi, Mr. Chair. No, there are no members of the public here to speak to this application.
Okay, I appreciate that, but I will ask the second time if there's anyone from the public that wishes to speak to this application. And I'll ask a third time if there's anyone from the public that wishes to speak to this application. Seeing and hearing none, I'll close this part of the meeting off to the public and I'll ask the committee how they would like to deal with this application. Moved by Councillor Coleman, second by Councillor Wheat. I think, is that you whistling, Councillor House? Or somebody
Yeah,
whistling?
sorry about that.
That's okay. It just puts us all in a good mood, that's all.
It was my neighbor.
Any discussions or comments or questions on the proposal before us? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Councillor Howes, how do you
favor.
vote? Okay, appreciate that. All opposed? Okay, that one is carried. Thank you, Kayla. Okay, this will bring us to our final one this evening. That's the 8.5, and that's RPT-21-150-ZBA 1321. And this is for Granite Shore, 440 Highway 24. And again, this is Kayla. Kayla, your screen is up. So again, make sure you're unmuted and proceed when you're ready.
Thank you. So thank you to council, members of the public. This is a zoning bylaw amendment application for 440 Highway 24. And the application before us is being presented for recommendation this evening. This application is seeking relief for the county zoning bylaw in regards to a proposed addition to an accessory structure. The applicant is seeking relief of 520 square meters from the maximum permitted area of 200 square meters to allow for a total of 720 square meters for an accessory residential building. And currently the existing size today for the structure is 410 square meters. The lands are designated agricultural in the official plan, which does contemplate for residential use as well as accessory structures. The lands are also zoned agricultural within our county zoning bylaw, and the relief is from section 4.4 to facilitate the addition. It's my understanding that the proposed addition to the accessory structure is for personal use. Planning staff are recommending that the application be approved, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, Kayla. Are there any questions of our planner at this time? Okay, seeing, no, Councillor Gatward, you got your hand up just in time. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Kayla. Does the applicant live at this address? Or is this application for a tenant?
So through the chair to Councillor Gatward, it's my understanding that Granite Shore Homes is the contractor. So they are listed as the applicant, but they will just be the contractor doing this addition. The homeowner does live at this location. It's my understanding they live there and that it's a personal car storage for them is what they're proposing for the addition.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Kayla? Okay, I'll ask if the applicant or the agent thereof wishes to speak to this application, and I'm going to guess, Bob, that would be you.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman, Mayor Bailey, members of the committee. I'm not sure I got much to add to this application. I think it's pretty straightforward, and I'd just be happy to answer any questions that the committee might have.
Okay, does the committee have any questions of Mr. Phillips? Okay, seeing none, I don't see any hands up. So at this point then, I will open this meeting up to the public, and I'll ask our clerk, Adam, if there's anyone from the public that has come out this evening to speak to this application.
Hi, Mr. Chair. No, there are no members of the public here to speak to this application.
Okay, thank you, Adam. But I will ask a second time if there's anyone from the public that wishes to speak to this application. And I'll ask a third time if there's any member from the public that wishes to speak to this application. Seeing and hearing none, I'll close this part of the meeting off to the public, and I'll bring it back to committee, and I'll ask the committee how they would like to deal with this item. And it'll be moved by Councillor Coleman, second by Councillor Gatward. Any further comments, questions, discussions before we call the vote? Okay, I don't see any hands up, so all in favor?
Favor.
All opposed? Okay. And that is carried. Again, Bob, you just let your client know that this has to go to council at the end of this month for final approval.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so just for anyone watching or listening, that completes all the public hearings tonight under the Planning Act for recommendation. And then we go to item 9.1, 9.2, consent items to be approved and received. There are none on my agenda. So this will bring us up to section 10, staff reports. And the first one is RPT-21-168. And this is technical improvements to the comprehensive zoning bylaw. And everybody knows our bylaw by now, 61-16. And Brendan, did you want to speak to it, or, well, is there anything you want to add to the report, which I thought was pretty straightforward, but is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Miller. So nothing to add and no presentation for this. The purpose of this report is really just an introduction to this next step in this project, to kind of start the conversation, so to speak, around these technical amendments. There's a few options or opportunities that we're going to look into amending that are outlined in the report. And we'll be starting kind of consultation with the public and further chats with stakeholders based on this once we receive approval and direction. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, we'll go to questions first, and then we'll put it on the floor. So, any questions for Brandon at this time? Okay, we'll go to Councillor Gatward. Go ahead. Joan, you're gonna have to take it off mute if you're gonna ask a question.
Sorry. I just have two questions through you, Mr. Chair, to Brandon. The first one is about temporary tent structures. You're looking at improved provisions. Would that include not having a permit for somebody who wants to have a tent erected for 3 days for a wedding?
Through Chair Miller to Councillor Gatward. So we wouldn't be looking at changing the permitting requirements for that. We could look at streamlining that process in the future, but that is done through the building code. There are requirements through the building code for tent structures, namely kind of regarding fire safety, and that comes in kind of at a certain size. So we would want to look to the zoning bylaw to match those requirements, just to make it very clear as to where the line is, where they would require a permit versus where one is not required.
Thank you. And my last question, shipping containers down at the bottom. This has been something that has become more and more popular, it seems, around the countryside, that there's even some for sale. I've noticed a big sign on 53 Highway. So I know that our zoning bylaw does not permit them. Only if you're going to be moving, you can have one in your driveway for a length of time. They are permitted in agricultural zones, is my understanding. So what is it that you are going to do about shipping containers?
That's a great question. So through Chair Miller to Councillor Gatward, right now we're looking at the potential of actually just removing the requirements for shipping containers completely from the zoning bylaw. We have a bit of an issue regulating between the use of the structures and then kind of what the zoning bylaw is intending to do with the regulations currently. So regulating aesthetic and the placement of the structures. We do recognize that they are a viable option for folks around the county of Brant. So we're just looking at exploring kind of the best way to regulate that. And we don't necessarily think that the zoning bylaw should be the only way to regulate it. We'd like to look at kind of coordinating, say, the property standards bylaw with the zoning requirements for structures, and then the Ontario Building Code as well, just to make sure that if they are placed on a property, they look good and they're safely done. And try and reduce some of the red tape kind of around it right now. And we will be exploring, obviously, conversations with the public. Shipping containers are a contentious structure. So we'll be exploring kind of conversations with various stakeholders and with the public as well around those specific requirements.
Yeah, I know of some that are on a residential property in Ward 5 that are contentious, and I don't know if they've gone to court yet or not, but I just think that a lot of people think they're great and a lot of people don't if they're ugly and they're right next door to your house, or if they place them too close to the property line and wreck Mrs. Brown's roses or whatever. So I'm glad it's being looked at. but a lot of people use them for sheds, and sheds are in the zoning bylaw as an accessory structure. And they only, I mean, if they're less than 10 by 10, you don't need a building permit for anything under 100 square feet. But I would expect most shipping containers are larger than 100 square feet. Am I correct on that?
That is a correct assessment. There are shipping containers that are below that 108 square feet threshold, but the building code, and in conversation with our chief building official as well, has kind of made it clear that if it's a structure, it requires the building permit, regardless of if it's a shipping container or if they're building it out of wood. And that's just to regulate the safety of the structures and the placement on the property.
Thank you.
Okay, that's good comments. Councillor Wheat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. In my opinion, shipping containers are okay in a driveway if the people are moving out or they're moving in. But I think there needs to be a time limit as to how long that container can sit in that driveway. Because we got a bunch of them in St. George that have been there for a long time. And it doesn't take you more than 30 days to get it loaded if you're moving out, or if it was placed there because you were moving in. You should be able to get it unloaded within 30 days and get it out of there. I've seen enough of them in St. George. I hear complaints. Why is that container sitting in that driveway? It's been there for 6 freaking months. Doesn't take you that long to get it unloaded or loaded. Put a time limit on it.
Okay.
If I could just respond to that.
Yeah. No, I was going to ask you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so there actually is a time limit on it right now in our zoning bylaw. They're only permitted really in residential areas for a maximum of 4 months, and as long as the purpose is related to moving or renovations. The difficulty comes with the requirements for permits. So it gets a bit tricky requiring a permit for a temporary structure like that. And that's something we're going to look at addressing with these new requirements, is making sure that we can kind of close up that loophole and try and get a bit better of a direction for enforcement purposes.
Well, I can't believe that if you're moving out, it takes you 4 months to load it, or if you're moving in, it takes you 4 months to get it unloaded. That is totally ridiculous.
Okay, which is why we're here tonight, too, so that Brandon can hear these concerns. So thank you. Any other questions or comments for Brandon? Go ahead, Councilor Ferrier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Brandon. I also want to make sure, though, that we look at some of the options for some of these containers and at least hear about. We just passed the home-based business bylaw, and I know some folks will be looking at utilizing some of the nicer shipping container options for some of their home-based businesses in the future as well. We approved a pub in Paris using very nice-looking shipping containers as part of the decor, and there's functionality there as well. And at social services, we've talked about case housing, and a lot of times case housing does come from something like a shipping container being utilized. So, I'd like to see some balance when it comes, maybe a fulsome report, because I think there might be opinions on all sides on this one.
Brandon, any thoughts on that?
Thank you, Chair Miller. So I'll just, that's a great comment. And there are obviously a lot of kind of viable opportunities to use shipping containers for various structures, right, for various purposes. And that's kind of one of the shortfalls of the current requirements. There's a very broad brushed approach. If it looks like a shipping container or resembles a shipping container, it falls under those requirements, which generally means it's not permitted. So that's why we would see rezonings for adding a shipping container to a restaurant, that kind of thing. So we're definitely looking at cleaning that up and kind of finding that balance.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like a fair approach. Any other questions, comments for Brandon? Okay, Brandon, just a quick question for me. Is this something we update quarterly? Is this correct?
So we're doing it biannually right now. We're trying to do it twice a year, the housekeeping and technical amendments. And just noting as well that once the official plan is done, there'll be kind of a full comprehensive review of the zoning bylaw, because that's required within 3 years of the approval of the official plan. So we will be approaching kind of a new bylaw, so to speak, in the near
Sure.
future.
And when this is all done, you have to put notices in the paper. Like that's kind of that's part of the Planning Act. Yes, you have to do
Yes,
that.
that's correct. It's just it's the same process as a private application. It's just the municipality is making an application to itself to amend the bylaw.
Yeah. Okay. Because I know I read about them all the time. Okay. Yeah. All right. We'll see where that goes. Okay. I'm going to actually ask committee if there's anybody that would like to make a recommendation or move the recommendation before us. Okay, we'll go with Councillor Bell and Councillor McAlpine. Any further discussions or comments? Actually, I thought we had some good discussion.
Just a note that Councillor Howe's cell phone has died. So,
Okay. Did we get that, Adam? I don't know. I guess you'd record that in the minutes somewhere, but
Yes, I noted that in the minutes. Thank you.
all right. We'll call it at 7:20 or something like that. So anyways, back to the motion before us. I'm going to call the question if I don't see any more comments and or hands up, so I don't see any. So all in favor? All those opposed? Okay, that is carried. Thank you, Brandon. And this will take us to our last staff report of the evening, and that's 10.2, request to close and convey part of Paris Links Road. And this is from Brittany Maione. Brittany, do I say that right?
You did, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so is there, yeah, I guess I'll go to you. Go ahead and present, because it might not be clear to everybody on the committee what you're proposing here. So go ahead.
Sure. So the purpose, thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose of the report is to give the committee notice pursuant to our sale of land bylaw about a future conveyance. The conveyance should be familiar to the committee, as it is a requirement of the minutes of settlement, which were entered into respecting the Paris Grand subdivision. So as part of those minutes of settlement, it was agreed that the county would convey to the subdivider a portion of Paris Links Road. And so we are bringing forward this report to advise committee that we are proceeding with satisfying that section of the minutes of settlement.
Okay, thank you, Brittany. We will get it on the floor, but I'm going to ask, is there anybody from the committee that has a question for Brittany on this? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Gower. Unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Brittany. The Paris Links Road goes further down past this half acre that we are being requested to convey. So we're making it a dead end. And I'm concerned about our snowplow when they come down Paris Links Road. The red line on this diagram that I have is right near 64 Paris Links Road's driveway. So where is the snow going to go? And how is our snowplow going to turn around?
Brittany, do you understand where she's referring to?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Gatward. I do understand the question. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer with respect to the movements of the snowplows. I will state that I believe that the operations department was involved in preparing the minutes of settlement and the plan that's going forward. There are many steps to the plan with respect, the first step being the closing of that portion of the road, and then there'll be an easement over that road, and then another temporary road will be being constructed, and then a final road is my understanding. So it is quite complicated, but I will state that operations is aware of the plan, and I'm sure that's something that they have considered, but we can get you a more fulsome answer once I have an opportunity to speak with them.
Oh, so you've kind of answered that it's not going to be a dead end.
No, so it's going to be a temporary easement over that portion until another easement is prepared. So it will not be a dead end. There will be eventually another road, permanent road constructed.
Thank you. That's fine.
So Brittany, just following up on what Councillor Gatward's asking, to me, this is just the first step, correct? Before, is that correct?
Yes, that's exactly correct. The first step is simply to do this conveyance. Practically, it will not change anything because there will be an immediate easement over that portion to benefit the county. It's simply required so that we can move forward with the subdivision process.
Okay. Thank you. Michael or Jody, was there anything you guys want to add? This is the first time I've seen you.
Thank you. No, actually, Brittany answered that quite aptly, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Walton was involved with all of the settlement discussions and is fully aware of how this road is going to get realigned. So she was correct in her answer to you, to Councillor Gatward.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions for Brittany or Jody or Michael since they're on? Okay, see none. Okay, I'll ask the committee. Can I get somebody from the committee, please, to put this on the floor for us? And moved by Councillor Coleman, second by Councillor Wheat. Any further comments or questions then before we call the vote? Okay, seeing no hands up, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, thank you, Brittany. Appreciate that. Okay, so communications, none. Other business, I believe, Councillor Pierce, you had something you wish to add or speak about this evening?
I do, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Through you. I just wanted to discuss Committee of Adjustment and the report, I guess, if you want to call it, that we get as council. And if we look at the one, there's been one since, but the June 6th, one of the decisions that were made on there were regarding MDS. And I know MDS is a big issue for a lot of people. This one, my understanding, was concerning a chicken barn. What I'm trying to understand here, at what point in time, and don't get me wrong, I know there's a lot of decisions that can be made by staff and that sort of thing, but what's the determination as to what would go to Committee of Adjustments and what would come to this committee as a planning committee? Because what I've seen in the history of the reports is the fact that, you know, they're calling things minor variances and that sort of thing, which in some cases is up to, you know, 50% less than what's recommended. And I know when the report comes to council, we have the opportunity to pull it out and discuss it. But I'm trying to get clarification as to if somebody submits something, what's the determination? What is the line that says, okay, this can go to Committee of Adjustment? No, this needs to go to the Planning Committee. If we could just clarify that.
Okay, thank you for the question, because I think we got about 5 people here tonight that could answer that. But
that's why I'm bringing it up tonight.
I think Councillor Bell can answer that. Councillor Pierce, or not Councillor Chambers. It was Matt. Go ahead if you want to help out Councillor Pierce on that one.
Sure, absolutely. Through the chair to Councillor Pierce, the big determination there is the 4 tests of a minor variance. And, you know, one of the things I'll say as well is it's very site specific. So, you know, not every application is going to be the same because it's going to be location based. There's context to the area, but the 4 tests of a minor variance, obviously the first one, is it minor? Is it appropriate? And does it meet the intent of the zoning bylaw and you know, the official plan? So that's the big one. If it meets the 4 tests of a minor variance, it would go to the Committee of Adjustment. And sometimes as staff will get an application from an applicant and say, well, you know, like, this isn't minor. This would need to get bumped up to a zoning bylaw amendment, because if we look at it just through the lens of whether it meets the 4 tests, sometimes it wouldn't get a favorable recommendation. And we don't like to say no if we don't have to. Sometimes it's more appropriate for applications to come to council because, you know, there's a little bit more wiggle room when it comes to zoning bylaw amendments. So that's when it would get bumped up to a zoning bylaw amendment and then come to council.
Okay, and a follow-up if I could, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate that response, Matt, and I've asked this question before, and the biggest issue that I've had, and you just alluded to it, it's the fact of, you know, is it minor? To me, when you're reducing something by, in some cases, 50% and more, that to me is not a minor variance. And so I'm trying to get at, like, if it's 20%, if it's 30%, by the sounds of it, there's no specific percentage wise when something is classified as minor. It's just up to the decision of whoever reads that application. Is that a fair statement?
Well, yeah, through the chair to Councillor Pierce, it's not always a numbers game. Oftentimes, like I said, it's very contextual. With MDS is kind of an interesting one too, because there could be other incidences of conflict that exist in the area, in which case it might be considered minor because of those other conflicting land uses. So with MDS, there's always a lot that comes into it, but it is often an interpretation that's made by the planner who receives the file. We do bring those files to a large meeting and discuss them so that we have consensus within the group. But yeah, that's our process anyway.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Like I said, and I know it's been explained before, but the more that I read the reports from Committee of Adjustment, it just seems that there's no line that says what's minor and what isn't minor. That's my biggest concern, and I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
So, Councilor Veers, that's a good question. I know quite a few of us around the table have been down that rabbit hole before, so it's a fair question. And just I appreciate the planning staff. I'll say it tonight that they are at least getting those decisions from the Committee of Adjustment out to council, because we weren't getting them for a while. So it's good to see.
Absolutely. That was part of the problem before, Mr. Chair, and I agree with that. And we're finally getting a little bit more information rather than just the final decision, which is better for us to understand the whole thing if somebody asks. So
yeah,
thank you.
And people do ask, because
yeah,
you think we're confused. You can go to the public. I'm telling you, people just, it gets really hard sometimes. So
well, and if I could, Mr. Chair, thank you. That's the question that's been asked to me on several occasions is, well, this one was a reduction of 50% and it was considered minor. This one's a reduction of 20% and it wasn't considered minor, and they refused it. So again, I appreciate the response, Matt, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, Matt come up with a really good answer, and I know Jody could write a book on it because she knows this inside and out. So. Okay, I didn't see anybody raise anything before under other business, so I'm going to go on. And this basically concludes our meeting. I'll just point out to the committee, and I think everybody knows we do not, this is for the public mostly, we do not have a planning meeting scheduled for August. And I did talk to Matt, and he said we should be fine. So we will see everybody again in September. So seeing no other hands up, I will call this meeting to adjourn. And wish you all a good night. Go Habs. So.